Bueno, buenas tardes. Muchas gracias. Bienvenidos a la Universidad Abat al máster de Innovación, Tecnología y Metaverse. Hoy nuestra clase habitual de martes y jueves la hemos abierto, ¿no? Hemos abierto a nuestros alumnos, están mezclados ahí con ustedes para entrar en el mundo del conocimiento tecnológico. Hace ya algunos años, esta universidad, la empezamos a analizar la comunicación inmersiva y el metaverso. Empezamos a investigar el 3D, la realidad virtual, qué implicaba todo esto, ¿no? Nuestros alumnos lo conocen y fue una experiencia bastante innovadora, porque lo que ahora es un boom tecnológico y una referencia tecnológica, en aquel momento era un proceso experiencial de cómo llegar a las marcas. Empezamos cómo analizar las marcas, cómo el negocio de las marcas podían interactuar con esa comunicación inmersiva de la realidad virtual, del videomapping, de la holografía, etcétera, etcétera. Bajo este principio, nosotros, esta universidad, que en esta línea de investigación estamos avanzando desde el máster, tenemos el mobile, ¿no? En Barcelona, y por lo tanto ir todos al mobile es mucho más complejo que hacer una reflexión. Hoy se trata de hacer una reflexión conjunta, una reflexión también de interacción, donde ustedes pregunten, donde ustedes despejen dudas, porque al fin y al cabo la ciencia se basa en la duda y en la metodología. Nosotros nos basamos en dudar de casi todo para ir avanzando y cada vez somos más pequeños cuando más sabemos y más entramos en el tema. Este tema que se abrió con el tema de metaverso de Zuckerberg, todo lo que eso implica, y quién lidera este proceso, quién lo va a acabar liderando esto. Desde luego, desde nuestra visión creemos que esto no lo puede liderar la compañía, lo tiene que liderar la sociedad y de otra forma. Bueno, hoy, bajo este principio, creo que nuestro invitado, Thomas Brannen, va a dar su versión y vamos a dar con usted, que forma parte del claustro de profesores, vamos a intentar hacer esta reflexión. No es tanto una ponencia, porque en la universidad las clases magistrales ya es un concepto que no nos gusta, es reflexionar conjuntamente a dónde estamos, cuál es nuestro proyecto y cómo lideramos este proceso desde Barcelona y desde esta universidad. Por favor, Juan Francisco es el director de departamento del área de comunicación de esta universidad y por lo tanto trabajamos de forma conjunta. Yo soy el director de máster y trabajamos conjuntamente en todos estos procesos de investigación y además eres un investigador sobre inteligencia artificial, cosa que al final todo se acaba cruzando. Veremos de qué forma unimos inteligencia artificial, pensamientos, en qué nivel estamos de la inteligencia artificial de 1 a 5, estamos en 1,3, en 1 o en 0,2. ¿No? Juan Francisco, por favor, insisto, gracias, es un placer tenerles aquí a todos ustedes, bienvenidos. Vamos a ver cómo el conocimiento nos lleva a algún lugar de aquí casi 2 horas cerca de la zona. Por favor.
Muchas gracias, Juanel. Además, este máster nos unió, gracias a este máster nos conocimos y empezamos a liderarlo y fue un placer desde aquel entonces pues, seguir liderando la comunicación en esta universidad. Bienvenidos todos a la Universidad de Abat al. Yo simplemente me pidió Manel que estuviera para dar marco institucional a este evento y encantado de estar aquí. Es imposible entender la comunicación sin tecnología y es imposible entender la tecnología sin comunicación. Es un match obligado y la universidad debe estar precisamente para esto, para proponer foros, momentos en los que no solamente nuestros alumnos, sino que más personas puedan entrar en esta reflexión, también con nuestros invitados, que ahora enseguida les gustaría darles paso, y reflexionar sobre las tendencias hacia dónde estamos yendo. Eso es la universidad, y la universidad no debe estar alejada ni de estos eventos importantes que suceden en nuestra ciudad, ni de las empresas, ni de esa reflexión de mercado que obligatoriamente tenemos que tener muy presente. Thomas Brannen, thank you for being here. También Agustín Agelic, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Thank you for being here, for sharing with us your knowledge, your experience with us together. So it's a pleasure. Also, welcome here to our institution for being here. De mi parte ya estaríamos, ¿eh? Si quieres, tenemos paso a nuestros invitados. Sí. Muchas gracias.
Entremos en el foco.
Yes, vamos a hacer la sesión en inglés. I am now going to introduce my friend and colleague Tom Brannen. Tom Brannan has a degree in business administration and digital technologies from the Georgia University. He's from Atlanta, in the United States. I met Tom perhaps 50 years ago, at least. We are both members of the Society of Communications Technology Consultants International. That is a group of independent consultants. Tom has been for 25 years consulting, and when we say what is an independent consultant, it's a consultant that always provides advice without any kind of conflict of interest. They only take care of the interest of their clients. This is very important to know. Independence of criteria. And now, Tom, as the technology, he has evolved, and now it's more focused on the analyst area. In the group, there are consultants and analysts, and the analysts study the trends of the technology and has a different point. He's not now focused on concrete projects or concrete advice to the clients. He's also having a more holistic vision about the trends, and he's working with a lot of different vendors and getting a lot of information about the state of the technology. He's the third time he's here in Barcelona for the Mobile Congress, and he has been posting videos in real time and a lot. And I saw the session here now. It's going to present his vision about Metaverse, and then the idea is to begin a creative dialogue between all the attendants, and or you are invited to ask questions or also to provide your vision about the topic. Feel free to ask. It doesn't matter if your English is not perfect. You can also ask or speak in Spanish, and we will summarize and translate to Tom. And I think that I encourage you to say thank you, Thomas, for coming.
Thank you, guys. It's a real honor to be with you guys and to be back in Barcelona. I love this city so much, and have had such great memories here, exploring the city, going to the Mobile World Congress, the food, my goodness. Absolutely amazing. It's so wonderful to be back. As a matter of fact, we're going to be talking about the Metaverse. And one of the apps is called Wander, and it allows you to put on virtual reality and explore the world. And so it uses Google Maps and Google Earth, and there's places that you can just teleport yourself into. And probably the very first building that I wanted to see was the Sagrada Familia. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. I teleported into the Sagrada Familia. It's not the same as being there in person. I gotta admit, but it did kind of bring me back to that experience of the first time I went there, which was in 1990, when it was just 4 walls, and that was it. And we were like, what is this place? And we just paid $20 to tour a construction site. But then to come back in the last 10 years, multiple times, and just be constantly moved by the beauty that's inside there, and the vision of what happened. And there's a lot of parallels to that with the Metaverse, because that creativity, that ability to look at things differently than everyone else in the world had up to that point, and then be able to design that and then ultimately build that. We're at the very early stages of the Metaverse, but that's the kind of creativity we're going to need. We're going to need people that think like Oliba, that think very, very different, that think very, very forward. And the thing now is we're not limited by physics. We're not limited by gravity. We're not limited by any of the constraints of the world. So the next Sagrada Familia, the next big project like that will be built in the Metaverse, and we'll have no constraints. So it's super exciting, and again, an honor to be with you. So how did I get into the Metaverse? Why am I here? What brought me into this? And I hate to bring up COVID because we're right at the beginning to kind of bring us down, but that's kind of where my journey started. So I started this new business. I was getting ready to go on the road and travel and meet all these people, and then COVID happened. So all my plans got canceled. Well, let's just say I had a lot of free time on my hands since this new business was hard to get going. So I started to immediately think about how are we going to communicate during this lockdown? How are we going to get together? And I realized very quickly that the video tools that we use, I love Microsoft Teams, I love Zoom, I love Cisco WebEx, some of these are my clients, but it only provides so much interaction. There's only so much that you can do with these experiences. So I realized pretty early on, we're going to need more because there's certain things that we can't do. If we took a break right now and asked y'all to talk amongst yourselves, you can do that. You turn to the person next to you, you have a little conversation. You can't do that in Zoom or Microsoft Teams. It's chaos, right? Only one person can talk at a time. So I started to think, how are we going to do that when we can't get together in a room? How are we going to replicate that experience from a communications perspective? And I realized that none of the tools that are out there do it even remotely, even a little bit. And so I started to think about, well, there's got to be some way to do it. And that kind of led me into this journey into virtual reality, because you can do exactly what I just described in virtual reality. And it's seamless and it works just like the real world. How many of y'all have some experience with virtual reality? A few of you? Yeah, everybody's got a little bit of experience. Augmented reality, and a couple people have some. Great, awesome. So some of this will be a little bit kind of catching up, getting up to speed here, but the technologies are very different, and we're going to talk about the differences between these technologies. But as I began to jump into virtual reality, I had these light bulb moments. So we're going to talk about these moments that I really was inspired, not by something I read or a speaker I heard or something I saw at the World Congress, something that I experienced for myself. Something I saw, an emotion that I felt as I started to explore these very early stages of the metaverse. Please ask questions, or even if you have a comment, if you think I'm wrong, please raise your hand. I would really love to hear from you as we go through our presentation. We'll also have some time at the end. I really would like for this to be a dialogue. I really want to know what you think. I want to, if you think I'm right, of course I want to hear that too. If you think I'm wrong, let's talk, okay? So what is the metaverse? I love this slide someone created, and it basically said in 2020, we had multiplayer games, we had 5G, we had e-commerce, blockchain, social media, video calls, even has potato at the bottom, but these were all things that we had, and today we just call them all metaverse. Oh, it's the metaverse. You go over to the World Congress, it's all metaverse. So there's this kind of big buzzword about what metaverse is. It includes all of these things for some people. Other people think metaverse is just what Facebook's creating, with this kind of virtual world and these goofy-looking people and bad graphics and just Mark Zuckerberg's, hole that he just is shoveling money into. But metaverse is really, is defined from Wikipedia, this is a great definition, a network of 3D virtual worlds focused on social connection. I think that first part's very, very important. We're talking about a social platform, not just a game you go in and play by yourself, but a social platform. In futurism and science fiction, it is often described as a hypothetical iteration of the internet as a single, universal virtual world that is facilitated by the use of virtual and augmented reality headsets. So what we're talking about here is something that has a couple of elements. One is this 3D spatial element. The internet is somewhere something you do, and the metaverse is somewhere you go. Okay, you don't join a meeting in the metaverse, you jump into a meeting in the metaverse. Okay? And this is a pretty big distinction. Now, you don't necessarily have to have virtual or augmented reality glasses. You can join it from your computer or iPad or phone, and they're trying to make it more accessible for everybody, because not everybody has a headset yet. But that's kind of the definition as I talk about metaverse that I'll use. I'm a business guy, so my focus is the business view of this. So we'll talk a little bit about consumers and games and stuff, and I dabble a little bit into that. But my real passion, my real motivation is how are these tools going to be used to help us learn, to help us collaborate, work better together, and how are we going to build this? From a scope perspective, just to give you an idea, the analysts predict, this is Citigroup actually, in 2030, there'll be 5 billion people in the metaverse with an addressable market share of $8 trillion. Now these are huge numbers, obviously. And the thing here is they're basically saying the metaverse is going to be very encompassing. So it's basically going to be the internet of the future. And it's going to be our mobile applications. It's going to be virtual reality and augmented reality. All of these things will start to just expand into this general concept that we call the metaverse. So the point here is that it's going to be all-encompassing and that it's very big. I'm going to use a little bit of terminology, and I just thought I would explain for a minute, just for some of y'all that don't have a whole lot of experience. There's a lot of terms here: VR, XR, ASR, AR, MR. There seems to be new ones every day, but XR is really an umbrella term, and it stands for extended reality. So it's kind of just the general, the overview of what we're talking about here. Virtual reality, we're going to talk about in just a minute. Assisted reality, this is where you have like glasses that has maybe some information, but it's pretty basic. Augmented reality is absolutely amazing. It's going to change everything. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And then mixed reality takes it even further, where you start to blend digital assets, digital objects inside the real world and manipulate them. That gets kind of pretty quickly. It's tough because it's very confusing. And these things are similar, but they're different. And then people use them differently. Some people call augmented reality mixed reality. Some people go, no, we do mixed reality. We don't do augmented reality. We do something better. So there's a lot of confusion around this. We're going to kind of talk through some of the differences. One way to kind of think about this is it's called the immersion spectrum. Okay, so this kind of helps us to differentiate augmented reality from virtual reality. So we've got a set of headsets here, okay? And then over here in physical reality, we have just plain eyes. So that's just the physical reality as you see it without any devices. And then on the far right over there, we have virtual reality. So that's the Oculus headset. So when you put that on, it completely replaces what you're looking at. So you don't see anything other than what's being projected in front of you. And that's a three-dimensional, completely computer-generated view. And that's virtual reality. So we've got this middle area that's starting to get real interesting, where we can take the real world with this glasses form factor, where you're looking through the glass here, or the HoloLens is just a piece of like plastic. But so you're seeing the real world, but we're able to project stuff into that world. And not just stuff into your glasses, but stuff beyond your glasses, and actually can interact with the world around you. This is a huge deal. We're going to talk about why in just a minute. It's very difficult. I've seen all of these devices at Mobile World Congress and many more, and we're making progress there, but we've still got a ways to go. But we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So VR, as I mentioned, you have a headset. You're in this virtual world. That's actually my avatar. So it looks just like me, right? So, y'all see it? Nobody? Okay. Yeah, he's a little thinner than I am. He's got more hair than I do. I do have a matching shirt, by the way, so I can actually. And interestingly enough, that was Alex Kipman. He was head of Microsoft's virtual augmented reality until a couple of months ago. So I got to meet him in virtual reality. But you can see we're in a three-dimensional, beautiful space, mountains, trees. And we were actually at an event where there was a speaker just like in a room like this. And so I was one of the participants, and he was one of the speakers. So that's VR, again, completely computer-generated. As we mentioned before, social. So again, I'm not just playing a game by myself. I'm talking to people, interacting with people. Why now? I kind of told you the story about COVID. That kind of showed us why we really need this technology. And I always thought that virtual reality was a solution looking for a problem. Like, it's really cold. So what do we do with it? How does it help us? What's the point? And I think COVID kind of gave us that problem. And the problem is, how do we get together when we can't get together? So when we can't physically meet, how do we replicate that experience? And again, I shared with you, it's hard to do that on video. You don't have that same sense of presence. We've seen a lot of pullback on travel. It's opening back up now, but certainly with the pandemic's caused a lot of disruption in that. And then there's businesses that are cutting back right now. We're going through a lot of layoffs in the U.S. Tens of thousands of people in the tech industry alone have been let go in the last month. So companies are cutting back on travel. So they're like, well, maybe we didn't travel during COVID and we're still here. So maybe we don't need to travel as much. So we've got to figure out better alternatives. And I can tell you one of the number one objectives that we're hearing from in the U.S. particularly, and I know globally, this is a huge deal. We're all concerned about the planet. So we have these sustainability goals. So companies are getting more and more pressure to reduce their environmental footprints and to find ways to help achieve the goals that these companies have set out. So we got to figure out some alternatives to travel. I still love to travel, especially if it's far so long. I don't want to do that when remote. Isolation. This was really interesting. Before COVID, you know what the number one reason that people were afraid of virtual reality or trying it? They were worried they would be too isolated. They would put this device on and they would just go into this digital world and they would lose touch with their friends and their people around them and their family. And what we found was the opposite's actually true. During COVID, people were extremely isolated. They couldn't leave the house, so they began to realize this is social. I can put this device on, and I'm all alone in my apartment and I can't leave. I can put this on, and now I can interact with people from all over the world. So what became, what was one of the biggest obstacles has become one of the biggest drivers of virtual reality, which I think is just awesome. And it's very exciting. It's a very vibrant community. And again, international. I've met people from every corner of the world in social VR. Is a collaboration tool, which is the world I live in and the business world. There's some really important things. I touched on one, but that sense of presence, of being together. We all feel we're together in this room right now. We're here together. We're humans. We're in the same four walls in this beautiful campus. So we have this sense that we're in the same place. Our remote friends, hello remote folks, they don't have that same sense of presence. They can see us and they can kind of, participate, but they don't have the illusion that they're actually in the room with us. Okay, so they can get the content and they can understand and follow along, but it's a different experience. What VR does is allow you to have that sense of shared presence even when could be anywhere in the world. Control, I talked also about how we can't talk amongst ourselves in a Teams call or a Zoom call. It's chaos. In virtual reality, there's a thing called spatial audio. And this is one of those light bulb moments that I talked about where I was like, I kind of get this now. But if you're talking in a group, it has spatial audio. So if someone starts to move further away, their voice gets softened. And it's to the point when maybe they're 20 feet away, you don't hear them at all. So you can gather as a group of avatars, have your conversation, and then walk off to the side with someone and have a private conversation. So you didn't go into a breakout room or log into another account. You just literally walked your avatar so that you could have a little bit of quiet and have your own private conversation. And I've done networking meetings where we kind of did that, where we kind of spread out in this beautiful field. They have these rocks that were spread out far enough where you could have privacy. And people would network and they would talk to each other. It's kind of like speed dating, where you talk for 5 minutes and then it rotates around. But it was brilliant because there's no other way to do that. There's no other tool. The video tools don't do that. So that was one of those real light bulb moments that I really began to understand that this is not just a game. It's not just a toy. This is a serious business tool. And it's going to be kind of how we're going to start collaborating in the future. Immersion is another really big one. And education, particularly, schools are very interested in this because they can immerse students in a different environment. And it's funny because a lot of schools early on were kind of like, let's create a digital twin, okay? Because we want our students to feel comfortable. So if you could build our exact classroom, that would be great. And the VR people are like, why would you do that? You can build anything in the world. So if you're studying Mars, we're going to build a Mars environment. And the class is going to meet on Mars. Or if we're studying the sea, let's build an underwater sea laboratory, and that's where we're going to meet that day. Why we would pick 4 walls, of your average school is kind of ludicrous when you can build anything you want. But to build more immersive environments, it does so much. It drives emotion, and it drives a connectedness to what's being taught. Because you have these visual cues, you have this visual stimulation to help reinforce what you're doing. Same thing with business. We have meetings that are very serious where we want to be in a conference room and we want to, have our conference table and a familiar whiteboard and all this kind of stuff. But maybe we want to do a team building exercise, right? Maybe we want to do something, maybe it's a creative experience where we want to really drive creativity. We want people to expand their brains. Like, as I mentioned with the Gaudi architecture, you go in there, you're inspired, right? It's amazing. Well, we should build environments that help facilitate creativity for those kinds of meetings, and then you pick whichever environment best fits the use case for what you want to do. There's some challenges we have today, and this is on the business side, but we're doing this thing hybrid work now, where we have some people in the office, we have some people working at home, and there's this kind of mix in it. It's been working okay because it's what we had to do, but we lose so much when we have a lot of our employees are remote. It's hard to engage them. It's hard to have those unplanned conversations. We call them the water cooler moments, where you go to the water and, hey, did you watch the game last night? Hey, these kind of unplanned conversations that help build community. We talked about networking is very difficult. And then the employee experience. This is a big thing now because employees are frustrated with their jobs, and we've had a great resignation in the U.S. where people have quit their jobs and gone to work for other people, and they started a new company, but how do they understand the culture of the company? How do we onboard them? How do we get them to buy into not just the vision of the company, but the culture as well? It's very difficult to do that over a series of Zoom calls. And this is where VR can really fit in, and it's actually where some large companies in the U.S. are doing this. Accenture bought 60,000 virtual reality headsets. And now every employee that's added to the company, they send them the headset, they put it on, and they join this virtual world they created just for onboarding employees. And we talked about remote employees, but who's remote? And this was one of the big moments for me. This was when I was kind of like, my mind was blown a little bit. But I'm in a meeting here. This is in a conference room on the Meta Horizon business platform they have. We'll call Workrooms. So this is my buddy Nicholas, who I met in virtual reality. He's in Sweden. We have some other folks from Germany. We had some folks from the US. Probably about 12 people around this conference table. And we're kind of cartoony. I get it. Just like you saw, I don't look like my avatar. I don't know these people. But anyway, we had this great conversation, and they have the ability, if you look right here at the end of the table, you can see there's a video. So that guy didn't have a headset, so he just clicked on the web link, and he joined as a video participant, okay? And he was from the Netherlands. And so we had this conversation, and I was telling my wife, I was like, we had this great meeting, we're in virtual reality, sharing all these ideas, and we have people from France and Germany and Sweden and a couple guys from the US. And I said, and we had this other guy that dialed in. He was remote from the Netherlands. And when I said those words, I was like, remote? What? Why did I say he's remote? We're all remote. But as the words came out of my mouth, I was like, that's so insightful. He felt remote. He felt like he was not really part of the meeting. Like he was just kind of off somewhere. And he contributed, and we could hear him, and we could talk to him. And he felt remote. And what that taught me was that it was more real to be an avatar, even as cartoony and silly as they look. That felt more real than seeing someone's actual video because of that sense of presence that we talked about. And that was just one of those moments that was very, very powerful for me to experience the difference between a video meeting and a collaboration in virtual reality. That platform is really cool. It actually tracks your hands, and with the new headset, it tracks your eyes, and facial expressions, and your eyebrow movements, things like that. It's pretty funny though. You can work on your computer in this space, which is absolutely amazing. But when you look down at your keyboard, your eyes look like they're closed, and it looks like everybody's on drugs or something because you see their eyes just go down. It's pretty funny, but they're still tweaking some of that. But it's such a great platform. The other thing you can do there is they have a whiteboard feature where you can take your controller and stand up at your desk, and then it creates this wall here that you see in your image, and then you can actually write on a whiteboard that shows up on the other side of the room. So you kind of get back that whiteboard feature, being able to go over here and write on this, something that's kind of hard to do on some of the other platforms. So I love what they're doing there, and it's a real glimpse in how we're gonna work. For training, this has been like the one area that even the skeptics of VR have admitted is pretty amazing. We're seeing absolutely huge statistics for corporate training, 4 times faster to train than classroom. Not even video, classroom. 275% more confident to apply the skills they learned because they can simulate the skills. 3.75 more emotionally connected to the content. 4 times more focused than their e-learning peers. Companies are taking notice of this, and they're starting to do this both for like technical training as well as like soft skills training, corporate training, culture, all of these things. They're able to put these people in environments. They're able to put them through training simulations. They're able to let them fail. So let's say you had a security or a safety protocol you had to follow. Let's say you didn't follow it right, and then the building burns down, and you get to see it happen. So you're emotionally like, crap, man, I just burned the whole building down. Well, it's in virtual reality. Nobody got hurt, right? But guess what? You're never going to make that mistake again. Because you remember what happened when you did it out of order. You experienced the emotion of that. So training is the number one area that people are adopting virtual reality, even today, already. There's a lot of challenges. I'm sure we'll get into this later. Some of these get kind of technical, but the big ones here is there's still a challenge around user acceptance. There's still users that aren't comfortable in VR. Maybe they tried it, they didn't like it. Maybe they tried it with an old device 5 years ago, and they're like, I don't like it. In the early days, virtual reality made people sick. They would put the device on, and it would make them physically ill. The newer devices are much, much better. There's still some people that do have issues, but now the devices are better. The experiences are all designed to make people very comfortable. Privacy, and we're going to talk about this a lot. This is a big one. It's funny, I was at the Mobile World Congress yesterday and was meeting the people from Pico, which makes virtual reality headset. Yeah, I'm sure y'all all know TikTok. Well, TikTok bought Pico and their virtual reality device. They're a big global brand, but they're based in China, so we don't really get them in the U.S. because of the concerns about, I don't know, I don't even really get into that. But the point is, there's a real sense of trust. Like, do we trust some of these brands? The big brand in the U.S. is Meta, which is Facebook. Do we really trust Facebook with our data? And we're getting ready to give them a lot more data when we talk about virtual and augmented reality, especially on the augmented reality side. We'll talk about it in a minute. So there's really going to need to be this trust as a differentiator. Who can come up with a device? Who can come up with a metaverse that you actually trust? And I think this is a big open question. I don't know if Meta can pull that off. Quite frankly, there's so much damage with their brand. I don't know if we'll trust them. We need marketplace maturity. We need skill sets big time to build out this metaverse. One of the things we were talking about at Mobile World Congress this week is using AI to help build this, because the job's going to be so big that but we can use AI. One of the examples they use, I'm sure y'all have used ChatGPT a little bit, maybe played around with it, where you can ask it questions, or DALL-E, the art site where you can say, show me a painting of a bird in the snow, through a window, and in the style of Picasso, and then it does it. What they're talking about is like scanning books in AI, and then saying, build the world that's described in this book in the style of the Renaissance, or in the style that the book describes, so that some of this could actually be augmented. I think that's pretty interesting. We'll see if I can get Another big one is cost. You know, the higher end devices, the new Meta ones, it's $1,500. You know, it's kind of expensive. HTC was kind of bragging that their device is only $1,100. So we're still kind of in a cost area where that cost needs to come down. When we think about enterprise VR, you know, using VR in business, one of the things that I'm excited about is this kind of shifting paradigm. And people are kind of frustrated today because if they're on their computer and then they got to join a VR meeting, they have to put on their VR headset, log in, and kind of go through this. But we're starting to get to a place where the quality is so good where you can basically create your own virtual office in virtual reality. So when you put your headset on, you've got this amazing customized work experience. How many of y'all like 2 monitors? Do we have 2 monitor people? Anybody have 3? We got 1, 3. Anybody with more than 3? You got more than 3? You need 3. Yeah, I'm a 1, maybe 2 guy myself. But in virtual reality, you can have as many screens as you want, and they can be as big as you want, and you can position them wherever you want, and they're there anytime you put your headset on. So you don't have to have this fancy setup. And let's say you travel, you could get on the plane and put this on, and you would have your monitors basically out in front of you. You could turn to look at them, or just move them, or move some out of the way. And then your background could be your actual wherever you are, or it could be, again, any environment you want to work in. I don't love my home office. I kind of like the idea of putting something on and kind of being transported where my focus is now in this really cool area. Maybe it's by the beach, maybe it's in the mountains. I don't know, but having 3 or 4 of my screens up there is huge. Once you start doing that and you move into that world, now your collaborations become much easier because you're already going to be in virtual reality. So one of your colleagues, they just beam into your little office, and then you're just sharing. They can see whatever screen you want to share with them. So it actually becomes easier to collaborate than even something like Teams that we do today. So I think we'll begin to transition into that world. And then again, things like networking, relationship building. I've talked to a company, they do team building exercises. So you can meet in VR and break up into groups. And they have paintball and all these different games that you can play together. Again, to get people interacting with each other outside of work, to build that kind of relationship. All right, we talked a lot about VR. Any questions about VR before I shift gears into AR? Everybody with me?
Yeah.
Yes?
Maybe just one question about how long can really be in the VR headsets without having like headache or.
Yeah, it depends. I hate to say that. It depends a little bit on what you're doing. I know a guy in VR that he's a coder. So all he does is program. And he works for 8 hours a day in virtual reality. And so he's got his screen set up, and he can, he's got his social media over here. He's got his main coding screens, and he can do it for 8 hours plus a day with no problem, and loves to work that way. So it depends. I mean, we've got other constraints, battery life. So to work all day, you got to be plugged in and tethered. So that's a problem. Personally, after about an hour and a half, I get a little bit like need to take it off. But the current devices aren't very comfortable. And that's the thing I'm going to do. Just the physical pressure on my head and face bothers me before any kind of visual problem does. And the good thing is with augmented reality, how's that for a transition? Smooth. With augmented reality, you can just turn it off. And you don't even have to remove the headset because you've got a see-through thing. So if it starts to bug you, you can just turn it on. Or the HoloLens, you can actually just, it flips up out of the way, even that. So again, augmented reality, kind of like virtual reality, except we've got a see-through element right here. So we've got glasses, or in that case, a visor. And if you look over here, you see the guy, he's wearing a headset, he's got this complicated machinery, and you can see out in front of him, he sees some digital data in his view. So he doesn't have to look over at another screen or get his phone out or a tablet or anything. It's actually in his view. I'm going to give you another light bulb kind of moment that I experienced with the HoloLens 2 that's made by Microsoft. They're actually not making it anymore, which is kind of sad, or not developing it. But I was in my den, so picture you're looking at your TV at home, and I've got a pretty big TV. I love sports, so I've got a pretty big TV. But I was able in the HoloLens to create a new TV on top of my TV. Okay, so I created like a YouTube thing, and then I stretched it, and it covered my TV, and it was 50% bigger than my TV. Okay, so the thing you've got to understand here is that TV is now appearing on top of my TV, and it's anchored there. Okay, so it's not just something covering in my view. Like if I look away, I look back, it's still there. I could leave the room, come back, it's still there. I accidentally pushed it too far, and it went into the other room, and it disappeared because it knew there was a wall there, and that I had pushed it on the other side of the wall. And I haven't used the device a lot. I was like, how do I get it back? You know, I can't reach through the wall and grab it. So I went into the kitchen through the door, and it was sitting in the kitchen. And then I pushed it back into the den. But I was like, you know what? This is pretty amazing because it's anchored, and it basically means that you could have a TV screen, or a computer screen, or a tablet screen, or a phone screen. You can have those anywhere, and they could be with you wherever you go. So if you were bored in here, you're tired of hearing me talk, and maybe there's a football game going on, you know, something like that, you could actually have a 100-inch screen sitting in front of you just through your glasses, and you could be entertained. So, but for business, this is the one they really are excited about. And I think we're all going to be pretty excited about it as we get a little bit further. Again, same kind of drivers before COVID, needing alternatives to travel, you know, even during the lockdown, sending technicians out, doing training of complex things, very, very difficult. So it really kind of showed us again why we need this and why it's so important. We've also seen some technology advancements, and that's a lot about what the Mobile World Congress has become about. It's not just about 5G and higher speeds. It's what do we do with this stuff? What do we do with this amazing capability? Same thing with the vision technology, tracking technology, artificial intelligence. All of these things are coming together now in a way that we weren't able to even think about doing maybe 5 years ago. So we've kind of got this convergence of technology that's helping to drive this. A couple of devices that are out. This was as of last year, the Magic Leap. I got to play with that at the Mobile World Congress. Lenovo has smart glasses. Everybody is trying to get into this game. And the reason is it's going to replace a lot of our devices. In fact, I believe, I don't know when, but I do believe it will ultimately replace our smartphones. I think it's that transformational. And you'll kind of see why I think that way as we move through this. Training is another huge area where you can speed up training by taking someone through a factory floor, for instance, and have the data kind of pop out of them. This is something that's, again, kind of companies are already doing this today. Coca-Cola is doing this in their bottling plants. People are seeing this huge benefit using AR for training. Frontline workers, this is another probably huge area. Let's say you have this complex machinery right here. And a junior level tech says, well, I can't fix it. We're going to need the smart guy. Companies have these like senior guys that you drop them in when you got a complex problem. Well, they may be remote. You may have to put them on an airplane to fly somewhere. The factory shut down. They're losing millions of dollars. Now with a remote expert, you can actually walk them through a repair. And this is absolutely amazing because the augmented reality can not just show them the dial that needs to be turned, it'll actually make it glow, like which dial they need to turn. And it'll have arrows saying, you need to turn it this way. And then if they reach in and they turn it, it'll turn green when it's turned far enough. So it actually can walk them through a repair. So even like a junior level person could do a pretty complex repair today with a remote engineer on the other end, watching what he's doing and prompting him through a repair. And we really are getting close to where AI would do that. They're also doing this for quality control. I don't know if y'all ever try to fix something and you forget a part. Let's say you're putting together an IKEA bookshelf. That's pretty universal, right? You ever forget a step and you don't know it till the end? You realize you put the wrong piece on backwards and it looks terrible. Yeah. Am I the only one? Come on, y'all. Nobody's ever. Y'all know what I'm saying. Well, they could actually say, you're doing it wrong. You need to flip that piece this way and kind of catch the error before you spend another 2 or 3 hours having to finish it, undo it, and do it right. Well, that's a silly example, but for business, this is an absolute game changer for quality assurance. To make sure employees are not just making a repair, they're doing it the proper way. Design, this is a huge one. Co-creation. There's a lot of companies, particularly automotive, that's already doing this. Aerospace is already doing this. Where in the past you would come up with a new design, you would have it 3D modeled, maybe put it on a 3D printer, make a bunch of copies, ship them around the world to people so they can look at it, turn it around, make sure it looks good. Now they can do that in real time, and they can actually make changes in real time. So this saves tons of time, makes iterations of new hardware, new cars, and all that kind of stuff much faster. We're seeing healthcare. There's companies today in the U.S. hospitals that are performing surgery remotely, where in Africa, where there's a real shortage of specialists in certain surgeries, they can actually have a surgeon in the U.S. walk someone through a surgery in Africa. And they get to the level of, if they need to make an incision on the hand, the person that's in the U.S. can actually draw on the patient's hand in augmented reality so that it shows up in the view of the local surgeon. So he sees exactly where he needs to cut. And this is happening today, and they're having huge success. And then they walk that surgeon through that same surgery maybe 3 or 4 times, and now he can do it on his own. So this is a game changer for healthcare. We've already talked about team collaboration. One of the things that's coming with augmented reality is to be able to have like holograms. So this is, again, I've seen the demos. I've actually had a meeting with a hologram. So it's a 3-dimensional real person on the other end of it looks like they're right in front of you. And you're able to collaborate. You can they can hand you 3D models, which is pretty crazy to have this hologram hand something to you, and you actually reach out and grab it and can manipulate it. This is absolutely game-changing stuff. So we can move away from the avatars, the silly cartoony, but we want to see real people. Manufacturing, again, another huge area for this. What's coming, and this is just to me where I get really excited, I just don't know when. Because every year you're like, come on, let's do it. Apple, man, we're every year we're like, this is the year Apple's going to come out with their new device. That started in 2018. So we're 5 years now of hearing rumors about Apple. Everybody says this is the year. And we're kind of waiting for that iPhone moment. I feel like we're in the pre-iPhone days. Where we've got a BlackBerry, we've got some Motorola flip phones, maybe some smartphones that are kind of buggy and don't work really well. Kind of waiting for Apple to kind of come to the rescue and provide the right hardware, the right interface, the right ecosystem to make this work. This little example here, it's kind of neat because you can see kind of content in the glasses. And there's a couple thoughts. One is they'll come out with a true augmented reality glass, which would be awesome. Some people think they're going to come out with virtual reality. Or maybe just something that's kind of like your smartwatch, but it's on your face. So when you get a text, you see it in your glasses, so you don't have to look down. And maybe some combination of that. But again, it's the idea of augmented reality is you don't just get like your watch tells you to turn right or your phone tells you to turn right up ahead. This could do that, where it could get a little pop-up, or it could actually make the road turn green in front of you as it turns to the right. So it's actually mapped on the ground, and that reality actually gets replaced. That's that true value of augmented reality. Microsoft, I had big hopes for Microsoft. They were doing so well, and then they had some problems. They had some personnel problems, they had some technology problems, and they kind of pulled the plug on some of the work they were doing, which is real disappointing. But they've been working with Meta, and they're also supposedly working with Samsung. But one of the things they're doing with Meta is to bring their Xbox basically into virtual reality, so you can play Xbox games in VR with your friends. That's very cool. Meta has been one of the leaders. They bought Oculus, who was a Kickstarter like 10 years ago, and now they're the biggest virtual reality company in the world. They've added pass-through AR, which is a whole other thing. That basically allows your VR device to do augmented reality with cameras in front of you. So you actually see a video of what's in front of you. So it allows you to kind of interact with the real world, be able to see what's going on around you if you need to, and then do some of those augmented reality kind of functions. Very, very similar challenges that we have with augmented reality. We have, augmented reality, same things we have with virtual reality. Privacy is this is a big one, y'all. This is so important. People aren't thinking about this, but in true augmented reality, we're going to have glasses on our head, and what they'll be doing is analyzing everything that we look at. So when I look across this room, my glasses could have little name tags on each. We wouldn't need these anymore because you would just get a little hi, my name is Augustine. Right? So you're gonna have this camera that's gonna be constantly, and AI is just gonna be like, oh, you know that person, and that person's important, and you need to make sure you meet that person. It's just gonna be looking at all this data. When you look at something, it'll be like, oh, it's Sagrada Familia. It's whatever you look at, it'll be identifying it, giving you information about it. But when you start to break that down, you're like, okay, so there's a camera that's looking at everything that I'm looking at, and that's getting processed somewhere. And the Meta case, that's going to be Meta that's doing that. Or maybe it's Amazon, maybe it's Google. We don't know who. Maybe it's Pico and the Chinese. It's who do we trust with that data? How far do we want that data to go? Because if we don't share it, then this experience is kind of meaningless. Because if it's like taking your phone and putting it in airplane mode, where you have no connectivity, it's kind of useless, right? There's not much we can do with it. That's kind of how this is going to be. It's going to be kind of dependent on our ability to be able to share information and get feedback back, but still maintaining our privacy. And I have no idea how we're going to do that, but we've got to figure that out. Enterprise businesses are already super excited about AR. VR is a little bit harder for them to get their hands around, but AR they absolutely love. I think as soon as we see that right device, I think we'll see mass adoption. I think things will begin to kind of merge in all of these kind of worlds. This last point is the one if y'all don't learn anything, remember anything, oops. I really believe that AR glasses will replace every screen. So I interact with about 12 screens daily. An iPad right here, my phone, my computer, TV. I have a Kindle that I read from. You have displays in your car. You select your music, watch. We probably have 10 or 12 different displays. The glasses will just replace all of them. When you look at the location of your TV, you will see that virtual screen. When you get in a car, it's however you want to set up your dashboard, whatever theme you want for that day. And then things that don't have screens. Maybe it's your refrigerator or your stove or something. It'll have a screen, because now you can actually just display data for anything, anywhere you want. And this is going to be absolutely transformational to everything we do, and it's going to disrupt every industry. A big one is advertising. You think of all the advertisements you see in the world. Well, with augmented reality, those will be customized just for you, so that we see different ads based on our personas and our individual profiles. And while y'all would see it in Spanish, I would see it in English, and we're looking at the exact same thing. So this gets absolutely, when you start to think about the implications of this and how it's going to change the world, it's crazy. The other thing that it's going to do is allow you to change reality a little bit. And I think this can get very scary, because you can actually manipulate what people see and what they don't see. And I think people will have a hard time knowing the difference when they've seen it. And when they've seen it as though they've seen it with their own eyes, these experiences will be able to be manipulated in good ways and bad ways. One example is, let's say you're at the football game or soccer, as we call it for some reason. And you missed, you turned away. There's only one goal in soccer, I like soccer. But if you missed the one goal, it's 1-0 game, and you missed it, you're like, so you could actually replay it, not just as a video, but you could actually look at the field, and the players would actually go into a time machine. They would actually run backwards, and then you could watch it replay in front of your very eyes. So many cool things that are going to change all of our experiences. That we're just starting to scratch the surface of. I went through a lot pretty quickly. There's kind of a lot there. Some of y'all, this is probably a little bit of a review. Some of y'all, this is kind of brand new. Please reach out to me. It's funny, I had my AltSpace VR named there. AltSpace VR is going away in 8 days. It's this beautiful online community, and Microsoft's pulling the plug on it, which is causing a lot of chaos. But you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can scan the QR code or hit me on Twitter. But I would love to stay in touch. I'd love to hear some of your feedback on what I said. Is there something you didn't understand? Is there something that kind of caught your interest, or something you thought I got wrong? I know you guys have some thoughts about the Metaverse, right? Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Very interesting. I have a question around the experience we've had already in Metaverse. I think the biggest experience we could say is Facebook. They changed their name, the name of the company to Meta.
Yep.
As a symbol of where they're going with the technology. But I think it's been after 2 years, it's been a kind of a wash. It's been a wash or a write-off for them. Yeah, there's been no acceptance. People aren't joining the Metaverse. What's keeping it back? What's keeping the Metaverse from becoming what's on the presentation, what's being shown at the Mobile World Congress?
Yep.
It's going to be what's keeping it back from society to accept the Metaverse?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there's kind of twofold. There's kind of the people that have never tried it, and it's just how do you get them to do this. And so one of the things that Meta's doing is they're going to make their Metaverse product available on iPad and computer. That's a big thing where you can at least see what it is, start to go around. Because once you do that, like I started an AltSpace on my computer. So I'm interacting with people, and I'm like, wait, they can move their hands because they have controllers, they have a headset, their head moves. I'm just like this robot in there. Like I want to be able to move my hands, move my head, and so I got to get a headset. So there's a little bit of that. I think that there's also, particularly in Meta's case, their Horizon world that they built, it stinks. Okay, it's just bad. But they had to start somewhere, and it's a little bit like. There's not a lot out there, so you almost have to build it yourselves. And so I think the little bit longer answer to that question is we've got to get better hardware as well. So we still need better hardware, and then we need better worlds. And right now, it started out kind of as a gaming PC type driven thing with pretty high resolution. But as soon as we went with the Oculus Quest 2, we went to a mobile processor. So it's not plugged into a computer, it's a standalone device. What we did is we went way down in the quality of what could be provided. It was a huge trade-off, but it's cheap. You don't need a gaming PC, and it works. So we've kind of got to get better experiences out there. We got to get better quality. And when I look at it, I see where we are today, and I understand problems. But I'm able to look past that. Like, what's the Quest Pro's already good? What's the Quest Pro 2 or 3 or 4, 3 or 4 generations, and then how do we build better experiences to draw people in? I think we're already seeing this with the younger generation. The stat I heard over there that was unbelievable. The teenagers, the Gen Z people, like 75% of them play social interactive video games. 75%. So they're already there. They're already in the Metaverse. Yeah. Okay. They're just probably doing it on a 2D device, PlayStation or something like that. But like 80% of those 75% they spend more money on those platforms than they spend in the real world on stuff. Yeah. So we've got this generation; they're already doing it. We don't call it Metaverse because it's not VR today, but they're already there, and they're just. I mean, it's just.
So you agree with the Citigroup report in 2030? It'll be 5 billion. Half the world will be in the Metaverse.
Yeah, but that's basically everybody with a cell phone, to be honest.
Okay.
So
That's a switch.
you'll be able to interact with the metaverse with any device. So that's why that number's so high. It's not 5 million wearing headsets. But eventually we'll get there. I don't know when, but I think eventually again, because it'll just replace this. Great question. Thank you very much. And by the way, Meta, they had to do something because their traditional business of Facebook was not going in the right direction, and particularly with a lot of the privacy stuff Apple was doing, stuff that they needed to change their business model. There's going to be a reinvention of the entire market, y'all. I mean, think about it. Think about Apple and Google are kind of running a lot of the stuff, and then we've got Samsung and got all these other devices. But if we're going to reinvent the compute experience for iPad, for computer, for mobile, for TVs, if this is going to be reinvented, that means that it's wide open. That means that Apple is not guaranteed. They could be disrupted in the next 5 years in a huge way. And that's why I think Facebook's like, you know what, we can't compete with Apple today. But man, if we beat them to the metaverse, we can. Great question, thank you. Who else? Yes, please.
Coming back to what you said about TikTok and just about
I'm sorry?
the TikTok just
Yeah,
what
pick up,
Do we know what is their strategy? Because we know that Facebook is a big failure, like with Meta.
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. And it's interesting too, because they were starting out as kind of a business device, but now with TikTok, it's kind of more of a consumer device. But one of the thoughts is that digital entertainment is going to blow up here in the future. So if the future of video starts to move into the metaverse, they have these demonstrations of these K-pop artists that are doing concerts in the metaverse now. And particularly when we couldn't travel with COVID, you wanted to go to a concert, watching it on a flat screen is kind of boring. To go into an audience and have people around you dancing, going like this, it's a completely different experience. And they can do holograms in real time of the artist live performing, and you can have the best seat in the house, right? Everybody can have the best seat in the house. So it has a lot to do with that. How are they going to help usher in this new generation of digital entertainment? Cirque du Soleil, they're working on projects to figure out how to drive these kind of experiences in the metaverse. All of the sports leagues are all looking at this. How do we get people more involved in the action? How do we change their viewing experience and how they interact? So, I suspect it's along those lines. Great question.
Well, I have a lot of questions.
So, please. Yeah.
As you already know, I like to make difficult questions, not easy questions for you. One of the things that you share in your post during the mobile conference is a picture that says networks are not ready for metaverse. You have been explaining us what is metaverse and what they show, but what we need to run metaverse in the right way. We have been talking about this, and there are significant technical concepts that are very important for metaverse. One of them, for example, is latency.
Yeah.
The other is the capacity of computing that we need, the data centers that we need, the bandwidth that we need, the batteries that we need.
That's a big thing.
And so, because
wearing it on your head, you don't want to be wearing a supercomputer with a nuclear reactor that just on.
So sometimes when we are talking about technology, we are talking about what we see.
Yeah.
But I like to talk about what we don't see. Yeah. And what we don't see are the cables, the energy that we need to run this, the cloud. It's nothing, but if you go inside the cloud, you are going inside the box. So,
it's great. Yeah, great question. And
what we need.
Well, it's funny, so I was in this session and they said our networks can't support the metaverse. Just so happens that company makes hardware that helps accelerate 5G networks. And I was kind of like, oh, well, of course you think it's all broken because you sell the solution to it. But yeah, I mean, we're going to need, you know, really, really good 5G, not just 5G, but the good version of it. Latency is a big deal because you're talking about, in some cases, you're going to be, you know, sending data and sending updates to the headset. We talked about it can make you sick. Well, one of the things that can make...
One parenthesis. Anybody in the room knows what is latency?
Yeah, it's great. You know, great point. So latency basically is the time it takes for the network to talk to your device. Okay. And it's measured and used to be measured in seconds. Now it's measured in, you know, nanoseconds or even smaller. But when you talk about virtual reality, if there's a slowdown in the network, it can make you physically sick because as you turn your head, if the device doesn't update, then it's very disorienting and actually can make you physically ill. So latency is very, very important. And we're talking about, you know, the 10 milliseconds of latency is kind of one of the lines. I think I've read where 30 people can tolerate, you know, under 30 milliseconds of latency in VR, but you get above that, and it can start to be problematic. So we're talking about very, very fast networks. Fiber optic networks, you know, latency is measured in nanoseconds or maybe even in milliseconds. But when you start to think about 5G, there is a low latency version of 5G, but we're not seeing it in a lot of places. Wi-Fi typically doesn't do very well with latency. So you've got this delay problem of data going back and forth. And it can be very problematic. So these are things that I'm advising my clients to do is make sure your networks are up to date. Make sure you have the latest standards in place. Make sure that you're really working on this latency issue because it's your projects will fail if you don't. And it's not like a video where maybe the quality is not quite as good. It's a little bit of buffering. You know, we're talking about people being physically ill or just hating the experience so much they're done and they don't ever want to put it back on again. So that's a great question.
Tom, tell us more about this, because now there is the concept of edge computing.
Yes.
And we are going to install splitting in the territory.
Yeah.
A lot of medium size and small data centers, because you mentioned, you told me that there is a distance. If the endpoint is more, I don't know.
Yeah.
100 kilometers perhaps?
Yeah. I mean, there's two problems. Number one is a lot of this stuff's being done in the cloud, right? So this metaverse is going to be built in the cloud, right? So you've kind of got a problem right off the bat. Like, okay, well, I got to communicate to the cloud, so I got to go usually over Wi-Fi to my router, and then over a fiber connection, and then over the internet to get to the cloud, and then back every time data's transmitted. So you kind of have this natural problem of being in the cloud. And this is going to be a growing problem for all of us. And so they're talking about taking parts of the cloud and moving them physically closer to users. So you have these edge compute devices that bring the cloud physically closer to them to help with the latency problem, help with this transmission problem. The other kind of interesting thing that I think is going to happen is, like, a lot of the processing is done on the headset, and a lot of companies are like, well, maybe we can do the processing in the cloud. So we don't have to tie up the battery resources, and we can do a lot cooler stuff. And we're just going to send image updates only. So we're not going to do any processing or any heavy-duty graphic stuff here. We'll do that in the cloud on the edge. But again, the problem is then you've got to have a really, really good network connection, because now you're completely dependent on it. So it's a challenge on two fronts. It's how do we make the network better, and then how do we make these devices, you know, as good as possible without the HoloLens device I showed you. It's basically a computer that mounts on your head, and it's not very comfortable, y'all, and it's not very powerful, and it uses the battery maybe lasts an hour. So you know that's not what we need, you know. And so trying to solve this is complicated.
In my vision is that, particularly in Spain, we are quite good because we have probably one of the best networks in the world. At least we are top 10 deploying fiber to the home. Nowadays, we can find 1 giga, 5 megabits, symmetric connections almost in any location of the country, including the rural areas where they are investing a lot of money. So you can get fiber in the Pyrenees, and there are huge projects deploying fiber in Galicia, in Castilla y León, in Extremadura. So we must be very proud of the telecom network of Spain because I believe we are at least top 5.
Yeah, and we can't say that. In the US, we can't say that.
And this is not the case in the United States.
It's not, no.
And it's not the case in Germany. It's not the case in the United Kingdom. So we can be very proud.
Yeah. Well, our problem is we're so big. It's just hard to run. It's really hard to run fiber, across the Grand Canyon. It's hard to get that cable across there.
But this is good, but probably it's not enough. Because in Spain, we have all the data centers, most of the data centers are in Madrid. Now there are some very interesting projects of data centers in Barcelona, that it's in Turkson. Now in Barcelona we have a very new facility that is the Barcelona submarine cable landing station. And this is attracting data center operators to invest in Barcelona. There's a nice project of Turkson, very close to the landing station. There is another from Aku Compute. This is a subsidiary of Aquila Capital, a German company, to invest more than 300 million euros in a new data center campus. So we are working in this area. But I think that we also need to replace our networks, our LAN inside our home. There is you mentioned that Wi-Fi is quite complex because Wi-Fi is working in the spectrum where it's shared by all the users, so you cannot guarantee really the quality of a Wi-Fi. But also Wi-Fi is improving, and perhaps you can tell us something about Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7.
Yeah, it's definitely a huge issue. And Wi-Fi 6E it's kind of currently out there. Wi-Fi 7 is starting to roll out, and it's interesting. There's one device maker. They make a very high-end virtual reality device. Like we're talking, it's like 12K video. It's like this big. It's huge. But you have to use their Wi-Fi router that ships with it if you want to use it wirelessly, because they don't trust anybody's home Wi-Fi to run this thing. It is so data intensive that you have to buy their little base station. And I think that's kind of telling that, our home Wi-Fis aren't good enough. And we can get there. I mean, this is not a big deal, but the problem is Wi-Fi has been around like 20 years. And they've always wanted it to be backwards compatible. So you never had to upgrade your Wi-Fi router every couple of years or change out your doorbell and your smart devices. So they made it where it works. Well, the problem is people have 20-year-old routers. Or in the U.S., you get a router with, your internet service, and it's not great. So, this is a problem for businesses. It's even a huger, bigger problem for university that has access points everywhere, and they have to keep upgrading those things. This is something they're working on. How do we stay up to date with Wi-Fi 6E? And Wi-Fi 7. One of my clients is actually in the Wi-Fi business, so it's interesting you mentioned that. But the Wi-Fi Alliance that sets all the standards, they're taking this very seriously. They have a working group that's focused solely on augmented and virtual reality, and so they're very much working with the companies to make sure that the new Wi-Fi standards support this. It's just a matter of people adopting.
So at the end, we are going to replace all the network.
Sure.
To upgrade at least.
Always.
There are some questions there, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the session. I have a couple of questions. Number one is about the Metaverse. At the beginning of the session, you were saying that Metaverse is not to be owned by only one company. But the key reality is that today most of the Metaverse platforms are centralized. We have decentralized and they have some problems in terms of penetration. How do you see that and how this is connected, with interoperability, with the blockchain and so on? This is the first question, and interoperability is going to help on the adoption of the Metaverse. And the second question is around the ethics. What is the approach of ethics about the Metaverse now that you can create as many identities as you wish?
Yeah, a couple of great questions. I think the first one, it's complicated because we don't know. how this is going to shake out, really. You know, I feel like I'm 51 years old, so some of y'all may remember this in this room. Most of y'all are really younger than that. But I remember, you know, I had a computer and I would dial in on a telephone line with a modem, and I would dial into CompuServe or America Online. And, you know, remember You've Got Mail, and they even made a movie. Love that movie, by the way. Okay. But anyway, that was going on the internet, right? But really, you were going into AOL and you were reading AOL news. Maybe you could book an airline ticket, you could check email. But you really were just dialing into AOL. And you're like, oh man, I'm on the internet, you know? And that's kind of where we are today. You know, that wasn't the internet. And we know that now, right? But I think it's the same thing with the metaverse. So it's like going into Altspace or going into Horizon Worlds or Decentraland or whatever you're going on to, and thinking that I'm in the metaverse. You're actually just like in a siloed, dial-up version of the internet. So I think the interoperability is very, very interesting because there's going to be so much at stake, and everybody wants that central avatar. I was thinking I'm going to make a slide that shows all my different avatars. They all look totally different and different names because I can't get Thomas B on everyone. And we have different assets. We probably have different wallets. We have different everything, right? And in gaming, this is huge because there's people that have reputations. Like they played thousands of hours of this game and get a reputation. They go to another game, nobody knows who they are. And even people that know them in that game don't know them in this game. So this is a huge problem, but it's kind of hard to solve because everybody's going to want to own that piece. And it's very hard to have a decentralized, in a perfect world, you would own your own identity, and it would be yours. And you would share it with whichever platform you wanted to.
Also, on the content that I create. Today, if I create something on Fortnite, the property is Fortnite, it's not mine. Probably, in the future, we can create something, and the content is mine, and I can be paid for the content that I create in the platforms. Because I'm also engaging, and I'm also giving something to the community in the metaverse, and they can pay for it.
We're learning this the hard way. I was telling you about Allspace. People have built these worlds there, and they're unplugging the servers in 8 days. So your worlds just disappear, your assets disappear, all that work disappeared. They also had a problem where people brought in kits. So they brought in like building blocks to build your own cities, your own house, or whatever you were building, and they realized they didn't really have the rights to those. And then the rights holders said, well, we didn't mean for these to go into Allspace and get built. So they had to turn off all of these toolkits and stuff. And it's because I thought we'd make it through this whole thing without having to talk about NFTs because that's such a sticky subject. But the idea is that yes, you own something and you have that proof that you own it, and then if you sell it, you can actually get royalties from that, and all of that stuff gets tracked, and all that stuff gets handled. And I think we're seeing. Okay, well that's that Altspace example is where we needed NFTs. That the kit holder can say, yes, we will allow this to be a part of the kit. And then when people buy it from there, they get the royalty and it all works perfectly. But yeah, we're going through those growing pains. But I think it's going to come down to the device. Basically, your avatar and your identity and your wallet will probably be tied to the device, just like it does today. I have an iPhone, I have an Apple ID, my Apple wallet. My identity is really tied to that. Whether I like it or not, it's got biometric authentication. There's just a lot of having my identity on the device. That's another reason why Facebook, is kind of like, maybe we have to get there first, because if we're the device, then we're going to own the avatar, we're going to own the identity, we're going to own the store. Everything you buy, we're going to get, % of. So I think that's important. What was the second part of your question? Is that it?
The ethical approach.
Yeah, we could spend the whole session just talking about this. There's so much to unpack there, and it's should you be able to be anonymous in the metaverse, or should you only have one identity? It's an interesting question, and how do you kind of manage that? How do we've got to kind of solve the identity question to get rid of bad actors, so that if you have one identity that can't be replicated, if you're a bad actor, we can kick you off all platforms in a way that you just can't come back. and keep coming back and coming back. So that's a huge problem we have today. I think there's a lot of this we're going into eyes wide open. I think the first version of the internet, like, we didn't know what we were doing. You know, this stuff was built in the 70s by the governments, militaries, like, you know, there wasn't any thought about ethics. There wasn't anything about safety, you know, but today we're a completely different place. So we're going into this thinking about these very real problems. And there's people that are working in the industry that are very, very concerned with this, so that as we build this, we don't get surprised, kind of like we woke up one day and realized we've got this crazy situation. The problem is we want a decentralized world. We want these worlds to be interconnected in a very decentralized way, but at some point you're going to need some centralization to enforce rules, to enforce policies, to enforce behavior. And I don't know how in the world we're going to do that. I don't know how you can do both of those things at the same time. Well, we don't want Facebook making all those decisions. You know, I don't want the US government making all those decisions. But it can't just be a decentralized free-for-all either.
But is this discussed in the Metaverse Standard Forum? Is this kind of question?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's a huge amount of discussion that's about this, and it's because the people that are really involved in building this are so passionate. A lot of them are educators. That's a huge part of this, that kind of see these real-world problems. It's not necessarily, the community is not just techie insiders, coders building this stuff. It is more people that are thinking about these kind of, you know, big challenges that are ahead for us. And I'm very worried about it because we don't regulate the technology we have today very well. I don't know how we can regulate something that's such a different paradigm that we you know, you can't just take, we have these rules that apply for TV or apply for email. We'll just apply those rules. That doesn't work.
And at this point, we also, for example, it's clear about privacy that Europe regulations and United States regulations are completely different, and we have not been able to align both regulations. So imagine we need to align with the Chinese.
Yeah.
So in Europe, usually all is forbidden, and you need to get a license, and it's the government controlling. But in the United States, what is not specifically forbidden, it's allowed.
Yeah, I mean, this is already coming up where there's been crimes committed in the metaverse. I'm being very serious. And the question is, when you have multiple countries, which governing law applies? Is it where the platform is? Is it where the victim was, or where and what they basically said is it's the country where the person that committed the crime, the country that they're in, those laws apply.
I know what kind of crime.
Well, I'll give you an example. There was a woman that was sexually harassed in the metaverse. And let me just, before you kind of like, really, how are you know. But I told you about, if you think about what I just went through, all right? I talked about that shared sense of presence, that kind of intimate relationship, okay? One thing that's interesting, one of my first experiences, if somebody gets too close to you in the metaverse, you're like, back up, dude, you're in my space. And then Altspace has a feature where they ghost. If they get too close to you, they disappear. And the reason is when they get close to you, you start getting uncomfortable. Like, I mean, and it's just like real life. Like right now, you're probably not that uncomfortable. But if I start, like, I won't do it. But there's a point where you're like, Tom, I like what you said, but you're close enough. Well, you can invade people's personal space. Well, if you take that a step further with the sexual harassment situation, again, your experience is so real that you feel that you're actually being sexually assaulted. And this is not a joke. This is not a made-up lawsuit kind of thing. This really happened. It was widely reported. And I believe it because I've experienced, that people being too close to you. You're very uncomfortable. I'll tell you another just anecdote, but I was this wasn't even in the full headset. This was just even in like a computer where we were kind of walking through a 3D space. And this woman showed me around, and there was this other woman there. And we went out on this little porch, and she closed the door so that we got privacy, so she could say that we could have a private conversation. The woman out there couldn't hear us. I felt uncomfortable. I'm like, wait, you're a woman and we shouldn't be in this little private space together. Like, I don't have that problem on the phone or on Zoom calls or on anything else, but it's that really sense of intimacy of being close with somebody that's crazy. So yeah, in that case, actually, they had to figure out, and what the international law has said. So the guys that sexually, it was multiple people too, which is horrible. But the ones that did that, they would be held responsible by the laws that they were in at the time. But this is going to get more and more complicated. I was thinking about when I came here, I had a 9-hour flight to kind of prepare to enter the country and think about, okay, where am I going? Are there different laws there, different customs, different things I need to think about. But when you're just, jumping from country to country to country and interacting with people from all over the world, this gets crazy complicated, y'all. And again, I don't know how we're going to figure out that, especially if we're decentralized. How are we going to do that?
There was another question.
Please.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for the concept discussion. I mean, I understand very well the complexity, probably, as all of us here probably are quite digital. But what about the digital divide? What about the people that is not digital? I mean, the predictions have been made regarding how many million are going to be in the Metaverse or whatever. This counts that there's plenty of people that joins that and is able to navigate that and is able to feel comfortable. Well, as you mentioned about identity, it's something that sometimes that makes very uncomfortable to people because immediately, maybe not this kind of grant, but kind of, thieves get there and take your money or take your identity to do something that is improper, whatever. I mean, what about this digital divide together with this comfortability with identity in the Metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and thank you for raising that, because I just didn't mention that. This is again, it's something we're kind of going into it knowing about day one. I met a guy in virtual reality, so I've never met him in person, and he's from Fiji, from the island, and his avatar is blue. Like, I'll never forget. Every time you see him at a meeting, you're like, oh yeah, that's the guy from Fiji. But he was telling me they have this real problem there with education. So they've kind of got their cities that are all good, but they have remote islands and remote areas, and they may have like 5 students. And they just can't build a school in every one of these villages. They're not able to transport them around. And if they did have a school, getting teachers to commit for many years to work in Fiji, they may come over for 6 months as part of some, mission or government program, but then they're gone. And so they have this real problem in these isolated areas. And he was asking me, like, can you help us get low-cost headsets? Because if we could send these 5 kids, a $100 headset, which would be a lot cheaper than building a school, and get them some good connectivity, now we have teachers anywhere in the world teach them. Okay, we're not at the mercy of whoever will show up and do this for 6 months. We can actually get really interesting educators. Like, we can get really good teachers to teach these kids and teach them long term and put them in a classroom with other kids in other islands and whatever the time zone, and so they can actually connect with other kids around the world. And again, do it at a price point that's way cheaper than building a school. So I think there's hope for this digital divide as we get that cost down, because you don't need a full computer, you don't need all the, if you could get a $100 headset, I mean, we could get $100 headsets into every community in the world. And with 5G and 6G, SpaceX now, being able to provide internet to any country in the world, to put up a hotspot and be able to do that, like, we're getting close to being able to kind of crack this digital divide where there's not going to be a lot of excuses that we've had before.
Yeah, this is about geography or populations that are sort of less advanced, if you want to put it that way. But I'm also referring to the age divide. I mean, of course, all the children and students today and young people actually entering the digital environment.
Yep.
What about the people that has not entered before and right now it's not there, and they have to keep living?
Yeah.
And then this divide, but not from,
So 2 things.
Tom, there is a very famous sentence in Spain that says, "I am old, but I am not idiot."
Yeah. So two things. Number one, absolutely, we're going to need, and again, the metaverse numbers I was showing you earlier, again, it's going to be, you'll be able to access it from a tablet, you'll be able to access it from your phone or a computer. You'll need some digital device to do it. Potentially, it could be a TV. It could be that kind of basic. If you can operate a TV, you can participate in the metaverse. Some, not full functionality. But I was telling you about AltSpace. One of the reasons I like that application is it's not a bunch of kids. Like VR Chat's another one. You go in there and it's a freak show. Kids just running all over the place. It's for anyone over the age of like 20. It's like, oh my gosh, get me out of here as quickly as possible. AltSpace is an older community, and I would bet, I'm 51, I would bet that a majority of the people that I interact with there are older than I am. And they're at every age you can imagine. There are male, female, from all over the world. There's not a typical, and I'm shocked at how even some of the older generations are adopting this. Maybe they got it for their kids, and then they were curious and they put it on. And in a lot of cases, they start meeting people their own age or have their same interests, and there's special interest groups that meet up. So there's one of the things I'm going to do when I get back is there's a lot of Spanish or language learning. So you can go into these worlds and interact with native speakers that can help you improve your language skills. Like, well, that's, who doesn't want to do that? And even for someone that maybe a little bit not quite technically advanced, that might actually be easier than trying to find an app and trying to, figure out how to subscribe to a service. So there's all these communities. I think it's not just you go in, it's like you go in to do something. You go in to learn something. You go in to be entertained or to network or just even social. So. There.
There's another question.
Yes.
No, I heard that Microsoft is going to close AltSpace. Is that right?
Yes.
And transfer to Mesh or something like that?
Yep.
Or,
Yeah, it's disappointing to see, and the problem is we don't know what Mesh is going to really be yet. So I want more details, but the kind of idea there is that they saved AltSpace. AltSpace was going to get turned off, and Microsoft bought them and kind of resurrected them from going away. And they say they can't maintain it, that the code's old and it's not very secure. I don't know. It's just sad. It's really sad for the community. But Mesh, what they're going to try to do is basically add virtual reality into Microsoft Teams so that you could do like a Teams video call or you could do a Teams virtual reality meeting depending on, kind of what you were doing, which would fit better for that.
And we, as you know, we are in a humanistic university.
Yes.
Please.
This is a question. Do you foresee a future when we all we are going to wear contact lenses to have enhanced capabilities?
Yeah, there's companies already developing that today. I hate to make predictions on stuff like this because I think from a usability, like absolutely it makes all the sense in the world. And actually, they've already got prototypes today that people have actually worn. It's a contact lens that has data in it. But you just don't know what's physically capable. How small can we make components? But the interesting thing is, like, if you have a headset on, all that stuff's pretty big and takes a lot of power. But when they talk about the lens stuff that's going to be needed to contact, you're talking about like grain of sand type displays because it's literally on your eyeball. So now you don't need much power. Like you don't need much because it's so small. Once you get really small, maybe it's possible. But I think yes, is it in the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years? It's hard to know how the advancements are going to go. That'd be the ideal, right? You put your contacts in, and then you've got all of your stuff. It's just, and there's a step beyond that, by the way, and that's the direct neural implant. Okay, you want to get crazy, freaky. Read Ready Player 2. Anybody read Ready Player 1 or see the movie? Anybody read Ready Player 2? Yeah. So it takes it to the next level where it's science fiction, right? But a lot of the science fiction of 30 years ago is what we're talking about now.
Science fiction, but Elon Musk is working on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's actually working on it. But that idea is basically that you don't need a visual device because it's going to plug straight into your brain. Now, I don't ever want to do that. Like, I love this stuff. When we get to that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm out. I'm out, y'all. Y'all have fun. But, you know, another time, another place, if y'all want to get a drink, I'll tell you about what that's really going to look like and what the possibility. Anybody seen the show Upload? I think it's on Netflix or one of those. But it's about a guy that basically he's dying and they upload his brain into the metaverse so that he can live forever. So that's, if you think about the brain as a computer and we're getting close to interfacing with it, that's totally, I don't want to say possible, but like not as crazy as we would have thought 20 years ago.
My questions are going to be more philosophical.
Please.
We
just went there, by the way. We just went there. Eternal life. Eternal life. That's pretty philosophical.
We are in a humanistic university, and you talked about, for me, it's key one word, and you have mentioned it in your presentation, that is emotion. In the traditional Western philosophy coming from Greece, we always have been advised to take care about our emotions and to take care of our patients, and the philosophers teach us that any man that is not allowed to control emotions and to control patients will become at the end a slave of someone.
Yeah.
So, but you has been explaining us that Metaverse is a good, a right tool or a much better tool for training, for education, trying to provoke an emotion.
Yeah.
And for me, this is really, really very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I know that you have feel strong emotions using Metaverse, and please tell your own experience about what kind of emotions Metaverse has, you feel thanks to Metaverse, and how we can manage this, because this is also about ethics, and it's very important. For me, it's a risky thing. All technologies has advantages, disadvantages, opportunities, and risks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can read about an event, you can maybe see a video about the event. You know, we talk a lot about storytelling, even in the business world. It's about telling a story. I've told y'all quite a few stories, right? This is an effective way to get your point across. The metaverse becomes more about story living. It's not just hearing about a story, but it's experiencing it. So let's say you're a student and there was this kind of horrible event, kind of human crisis, and then you could teleport the students into that space. Maybe it's a refugee crisis or something even really horrible. You could actually kind of sit them down in that, and they could look around. And they could see the people that are dealing with the situation. And you could just plot them down into that. That's going to be so much more impactful to them than them reading about it. Let them spend an hour or two in that world, and they'll be changed, right? And so we see where there's a good thing where we can connect with these experiences, right? But what if the experience was manufactured? What if it's something that never really happened? And now this person has seen it, they've experienced it, they've gripped with the emotion of it, and it's not even real. That's where it gets kind of dangerous. And that's where, again, with great power, becomes great responsibility. Where there's good, there's evil. Where there's, light, there's darkness. I mean, this is absolutely applies to everything we talk about. And you don't want to be Debbie Downer, and that's maybe a very question, but it's you don't want to be all doom and gloom about what could happen. I try to focus on the positives, but we need to be aware of all of this negative stuff. It will be the ultimate propaganda tool, okay? For good and bad, for education, for manipulation, it has that kind of potential, and we've got to be very careful.
In this area, the guys who are going to build or to create the content in the metaverse will be very powerful. And my question is, it's easy to create content in the metaverse. Who is going to create this content? Are we able, with small resources, to create, like now we can create a video and we can tweet and we can publish in a post in a web? Who is going to create and how difficult it is to create content for the metaverse?
Well, it's a great point, because I think we're getting to the point where it's actually going to be very easy, thanks to AI, because you'll be able to tell the computer what you want to build. And one of the problems we have now with this is a little bit of a side tangent here, but if you think about video gaming that's very popular, it's pretty grim. I don't know, the kids play some pretty hardcore, pretty horrible stuff. They're shooting zombies. They're in these pretty dark worlds, doing kind of dark things, right? So you kind of got these game developers that are ones doing this, and they're building this, and a lot of them are artists. So I'm not saying they're not artists, but I'm saying it's very much kind of limited to what this small group can do. But with AI and the metaverse and the artistic community, the artists that maybe they can see something in their brain, they just can't code it. They can tell AI, this is what I want to build. And then they can tweak it. No, not that. I want this. I want more of this. And so artists will be able to build, real artists, not just gamers, will be able to build out their own environments without doing any coding, without knowing anything. And the tools today are drag and drop. You can build a lot of these places. You can build with very little technical capability. So I think the AI stuff's really accelerating that, and I think it's very exciting because a lot of artists, man, you put them in front of a computer. Some of them really struggle, but if you give them an AI engine and just say they can just speak what they want, basically it builds. So that's philosophical. Now let there be light.
There's another question.
Yeah. From your work, let's imagine everyone can create its work in Metaverse. Maybe I don't like the works that created the wrong person, so we will have millions of Sagrada Familia. And we talk together close to the Sagrada Familia. You will see your Sagrada Familia, I will see my Sagrada Familia.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. And do you think we'll have some kind of agreement if you find blue and I find red?
Yeah, I mean it's.
And the whole thing is at the end of this, there is business behind.
Yep.
Because if there is no money behind, the game will not work.
Yep.
So, Metaverse is think to be a single thing built by everybody, or will be many metaverse?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be. It's kind of like the internet, right? I mean, this is a very, very basic analogy, but like the internet, there's millions of websites, right? Yeah. And so, but they're all interconnected. Like you can get from one to the next, and there's a mechanism with Google mainly where you can kind of find this. So I think we're going to be in a similar thing where there'll be these different experiences, and they will be tied together because they'll have to be. Otherwise, we'll just be this disjointed thing. But it could be maybe Microsoft will build the best business tools for the metaverse. So you'll go into the meeting room that's powered by the Microsoft technology, and then you want to play. There's a golf game where you can actually go play golf in virtual reality. Well, that's another platform, but you'd like to be able just to go from one to the other very seamlessly, visually, just by entering another portal from your kind of central hub. And so I think that's the challenge: is how are we going to kind of connect these different environments with different technologies? And, but we can solve it. I mean, it's not a huge problem. The Sagrada Familia is a great example, though, where you could have all of these, or you could have these buildings basically say, we own the rights to our structure, and you don't have the rights to build that. Or just, let's say someone created something else, they could own that. And we talked about NFTs earlier, where they could be you could buy that kit from them or buy that asset, and then they get paid for it. We're going to need that because that creator economy. We need to be able to pay these people. We got to be able to. Right now, people are doing a lot of it because they're passionate, but we really need this to be a business where when you spend 1,000 hours building something, that you can sell that and get compensated. And you can today, but we're not really where we need to be fully built out with the legalities and proving that you bought it and being able to protect that. That's a huge, huge issue.
Any additional questions? No, please.
And about emotions, we're sure it will be more real than internet or the games that we have today. And there's a lot of people having ludopathy because they get attached to the game and does not eat or sleep. This is more real. Do we have a risk that because it's so real and it can be so complex, our brain is going to blow? It's not going to support this in some persons?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, yes. I think the same things were probably said about TV, that people will just sit in front of TV all day. And especially the kids, man, they watch too much TV. That's what our parents, they just, and in video games, they're going to spend all day in video games. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's, what China's doing? Yeah, they're saying kids can only play like 30 minutes during the week. And they're locking down the game systems to keep them from doing that. That's one approach. And, as a parent, I love that approach. As an American, I'm like, no, the government can't, But it's a very, so there's kind of a continuum there. But some of that's just, like I said, it's true with any technology or anything. But I think it's, again, knowing about that potential problem, in advance is a good thing.
So thank you very much, Tom. And I think we have been talking at least for 2 hours.
I'm sorry, y'all.
Thank you very much for your patience and for your insights and for your energy and for sharing with us all your thoughts. And I would like to close being very positive. Okay? Of course, any technology has an important risk, but we have also the ability to manage the risk. Okay? So we cannot stop innovation saying there are risks. Okay? We are going to manage the risk. Okay? And what is really very positive is that Metaverse is going to encourage collaboration. And in my vision, the future is what we are doing tonight here. It's multicultural and multidisciplinary teams, people came from different points of view, different cultures. Now we can work all together to improve our society and our planet and our world. And I would like to mention Dr. Mario Alonso Puig, when he talks about creativity and about innovation. It's about to find relations between things that apparently have no connection at all. And this is what we are going to do using Metaverse. And thank you very much for coming, and of course, and a big applause.